Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Bitronistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. Thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you to all of our supporters for tuning into this briefing. It is a great pleasure to be joined today by the founder and chairman of IDSF, Brigadier General Amir Avivi. General, thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure.
General, a lot of our viewers are asking for clarity on really the next stages of the deal in Gaza and this great concern that ultimately Hamas only wants to proceed with these negotiations because they want to remain intact. But obviously, from Israel's perspective, they have to be ultimately destroyed. So to what extent is it in Israel's best interest to really engage in all of this ceasefire and negotiations when it could lead to Hamas being strengthened?
So we have a big challenge. We have to bridge between two important goals of war. One is eradicating Hamas as a governmental and military entity, and the other one is bringing all the hostages back. And I think that Israel's position is, let's get as many hostages as we can. And yes, the price is terrible. We're releasing terrorists. Hamas is rebuilding itself to a certain extent in the time it has while we are doing a ceasefire. But Israel is saying, as long as we get hostages, we're willing to pay this price because we know we can reverse it. We know at the right moment we'll go in and eradicate Hamas and enhance attacks also in Judah and Samaria. So there's no good options. It's both of them are bad options, but Israel wants to get as many hostages as possible. Now I can say that when I visited the Southern Command and talked with the deputy of the command, Yossi Bachar, who is a member of IDSF, he said, for us, even operationally speaking, the less hostages you have in Gaza, the easier it is for us to do the job. I mean, we saw the difference between the way the IDF fought in Gaza when they had to deal with the fact that there are hostages that need to be kept alive, and what we did with Hezbollah. How much easier it was for us to fight Hezbollah, which is a much mightier terror army than Hamas, because there were no hostages there. I think that this is why when President Trump said, okay, if until noon you don't give us all the hostages, all hell, Israel can attack. And Israel then said, okay, they are not going to give us all the hostages. If we say, okay, you didn't give us the hostages, now we're attacking, we're not going to continue to get hostages now. I think that Netanyahu, looking at public opinion in Israel, felt that this is not something the public is willing to accept, that we stop getting hostages while we can. So I think that the understanding is that really the decision-making is between stage 1 and stage 2. We are in stage 1. We are releasing hostages in certain terms. For example, we are in Philadelphia. We are closing the Egyptian border. We are not enabling Hamas to smuggle from Egypt. This is very meaningful. And we are getting the hostages. Now, the question is what will happen between this stage and the next stage. Because the next stage is much more tricky. The next stage basically says Hamas needs to get out of Gaza, lay down their weapons, and give us all the hostages. This is from the Israeli side. From Hamas side, they want the complete end of the war and they want to stay in power one way or another. As they say, we're willing to have the Palestinian Authority, which of course Israel is not willing to have, and we'll stay like Hezbollah as a military entity. And this is not an option. Even today, the Prime Minister's office said it's not going to happen. It's not an option. So I don't see how we can bridge this reality of stage 2. And therefore, the chances are that soon we're going back to a full-scale attack on Gaza, which the army is preparing. The only thing that might happen, and this is what Israel is discussing now, is extending stage one, saying, okay, let's continue the ceasefire for another few weeks, give us the remaining hostages, especially the ones that are alive, because the ones that are not alive are not an obstacle in Israel's way to attack fiercely. Israel war is about not killing more hostages. If they're already dead, we can go in, fight, and get our hostages and not being afraid that they will kill them. So we're trying to get as many hostages alive. Now, is Hamas going to agree to extend the first stage? It depends on their assessment on how much time more they need to organize. Every day, every week for them, it's meaningful. But they have to pay a price. They have to give us hostages. So they have to balance between their need to regroup, to organize, to get ready for a full-scale attack of Israel, and their need to hold the hostages as human shields to defend themselves. And there will be a moment where they will say, we're not releasing any more hostages. And at that moment, it might happen in 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. If stage one is not extended, it's the first 42 days, then we go to war. Now, it's important to understand there are not going to be any negotiations without a release of hostages. It's not that we're going to finish stage one and then we'll talk for half a year about stage two. This is not going to happen. The moment Hamas doesn't release hostages, this is the moment Israel goes into attack. And this attack is not necessarily going to be in the first day full-scale attack. It's going to be maybe first attacking fiercely with the Air Force. And as you know, we're getting a huge amount of munitions, producing them, but also getting them from Trump's administration. Just this last week, a ship with almost 2,000 Air Force bombs, they arrived to Israel. So the IDF is getting a lot of munitions. The Air Force is getting a lot of munitions, and part of these munitions are munitions adapted for a full-scale attack on Iran. So this is also happening. Maybe we'll talk about it afterwards. And so the IDF, in a way, also needs this ceasefire to give some rest to the soldiers, to organize, to equip, to get the munitions we have. And I guess in the coming weeks, once stage one is over, if they don't extend it for a few more weeks, we'll see Israel going back to fight. And I can say, talking to the chief of staff and also the government, Israel is determined to destroy Hamas. There is no scenario that this war ends without Hamas being eradicated. And Israel taking control of Gaza, disconnecting Hamas from humanitarian aid, and then we see how we bring about Trump's plan to relocate the Gazans.
General, thank you for that overview. Let me ask a question. In these many, many, many months of fighting in Gaza, the IDF has not been able to yet destroy Hamas, partly, as you noted, because they're limited as long as there are live hostages being held by Hamas. So if, in fact, Hamas fails to release all of the live hostages, how will this next round of fighting be any different? Why won't we be in the same scenario again in a year from now? What could change?
I think that what is going to change is what I said at the end, is how we manage the humanitarian aid. When we, at the beginning of the war, didn't give Hamas any gasoline, and the provisions were really scarce, this put Hamas under huge, huge pressure. And this went on until January. And then in January, the administration, Biden's administration, started pressuring Israel seriously to stop that and bring as much humanitarian aid as needed. And this changed completely the reality inside Gaza. This time, I think that when President Trump says there's going to be hell, there's two kinds of hell. One is how fiercely you attack them militarily, and the second one, and even more important than that, how you handle the humanitarian aid. And Israel needs to disconnect Hamas completely from the humanitarian aid, and also bring only really the most necessary things, no gasoline and no other things, I don't know, cola cans or whatever they're bringing them now. This will bring a collapse to Hamas. Even if we push them to a very small area with a few hostages, overall Hamas will collapse as a governmental and military entity. Because winning the war is not about a few terrorists holding hostages. It's about Hamas governing Gaza and Hamas being a military entity. And this we need to destroy, and eventually we'll also get our hostages. So the army, of course, I cannot go into details what are the plans, but I can assure you that the army prepared very, very serious plans to carry out everything I said now.
So Hamas clearly built up a stockpile over more than a decade to prepare for this war. If there was a more significant, robust siege on Gaza, is there any sense of what Hamas's stockpile currently looks like in terms of weapons or even just humanitarian aid that they've been replenishing in their stockpiles? Meaning, if really all of that humanitarian aid is blocked from Hamas, how many months can they go until they become weakened?
It's hard to say. But I think that talking about everyday provisions, food, not long, probably a few weeks. We have to remember that in vast areas in Gaza, there is no electricity at all. And people are in tents. They don't have refrigerators. They cannot keep the food in a refrigerator. So I think that we can put a lot of pressure very fast. And we have to remember that psychologically also, think about it. People now went from El Mawasi back north. They saw the devastation of northern part of Gaza. And now might be a reality where the IDF goes in and relocates them again. Says, okay, move from here, move from there, and a full-scale attack. This is going to have a huge psychological impact on the Gazan society. And when they'll see that this is a decisive attack and it's game over, then at a certain point we'll see a collapse. Until now, throughout the war, Israel did mostly raids. We went in, we went back out, and so on. And this is not the way Israel is going to do it the next time. Next time, Gaza will be conquered completely. It's going to be a completely different scenario. We are arriving to this scenario with the best trained army in the world, with huge amounts of capabilities and technologies and experience of our soldiers, and a lot of munitions and determination to get the job done. And while we are building ourselves, Hamas' ability to rebuild itself is very, very limited. They're organizing with whatever they have inside Gaza, but they are surrounded from all places, including the Egyptian border. They don't have industries. They don't have lines of production. They might be able in an apartment to assemble a few rockets and maybe place some IEDs. But looking at the big picture, they're going to encounter a mighty and motivated army and well-equipped, while they are left with maybe 10-15% of what they were before. And because we are able to do a siege, we control everything. We control the food, the electricity, the water. It's just a matter of how we apply this, how we do it in a way that will bring a result. We could have won long ago if it was not because of our dependence on the administration and munitions. This teaches us a big lesson, by the way, about being able to really sustain a war by yourself and not be so dependent. Should have been dependent like that. Should have been able to produce our own capabilities throughout the war. And also how much it affects what is the position of the administration, because at the end of the day, we need the administration to defend us in the UN Security Council. So we all the time need to take in account the position of the US.
Thank you, General. If we can switch gears now and look up north to Lebanon, please explain to us what is really in the works right now with the IDF and this change in the forces in Lebanon scheduled for tomorrow.
Maybe just before Lebanon, I see questions about Egypt. There's a lot of talk about the buildup of force of Egypt, how big the army is, how well equipped they are. And it's true, and they have brought capabilities into the Sinai Peninsula. But the Sinai Peninsula is an area that is completely open. It's a desert. It's a big desert. The ability of the IDF, we need to. I don't see a need at the moment, but if we need to deal, whatever it is, 200 tanks or APCs or whatever they have now in the Sinai Peninsula. This is I will call it a playground that for Israel is very easy to deal with. We're looking at what's going on in Egypt. We understand that Egypt might be a long-term challenge. I think that looking at the future build-up of the IDF, if the IDF have said for years now that we don't need to build ourselves against regular armies, there are no big wars anymore, it's all about terror armies. I think that since the beginning of this war, especially after the collapse of Assad in Syria, there is a growing understanding in Israel and in the IDF that the IDF in the coming 10, 20 years will be built looking at the Egyptian army and the Turkish army. These are probably the two potential threats. It doesn't mean that there will be a war with them, but when we look at capabilities, not intentions, we don't know what will be the intentions, we'll build ourselves to meet any challenge from the Egyptian army or the Turkish army in the future. And this, of course, will require a mighty strong army with strong ground forces, not only Air Force and Navy. So this is where things are going, and already now there was a whole work led by Nagel to give the government some directions of how to build the army. And already in this paper, they talked about Turkey, for example, as a country we need to look at. Lebanon. In Lebanon, Israel is staying in 5 crucial strategic places inside Lebanon. So we are creating a perimeter inside Lebanon without the intention of leaving this place, without Hezbollah being dismantled. And we are also continuing all the time to operate in Lebanon, attacking. We targeted the leading terrorist of Hezbollah that was trying to rebuild, again, their drone capability, and we killed him. And today there was another attack on a main figure of Hezbollah. We are attacking warehouses and rocket launchers. So Israel is all the time in mode of attack, monitoring what's going on in Lebanon, enforcing. We are enforcing by ourselves the reality where Hezbollah cannot rebuild itself again. Hezbollah has found itself lately fighting on the Syrian border with Syrian forces. We have to remember that the biggest enemy of Hezbollah is this new Syrian regime of radical Sunnis. Hezbollah has butchered many of these guys throughout the Syrian civil war. They want revenge, and they're fighting along Lebanese villages along the Lebanese-Syrian border. And there is also some fighting inside Beirut. Things in Lebanon are not stable. Now they are surrounded completely by Israel and a Syrian regime that is an enemy to them. So they are surrounded by enemies. We are still inside Lebanon. We are going to stay in these crucial places. We need this to bring back safely the citizens home. The government is already saying to the Israeli citizens that they can go back home at the beginning of March, but many of them will return only in the summer after their kids will finish school. I think there's a lot of challenges in creating the civil terms to bring back all the citizens. I feel the government is not doing enough to really create the terms needed. We visited twice in the last 2 weeks the north. We also filmed and prepared a video describing what's going on in Kiryat Shmona and the different kibbutzim and moshavim along the border. A lot of work to do. I hope the government pushes this strongly to create the terms to bring back the people. It has been 2 years since they left home. And so there's a lot to do in Lebanon.
Now, former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has said that Israel should have attacked Hezbollah in the early days of the war, used all the walkie-talkie plan that they had. And because Israel didn't do that, which he was advocating, that's why we're in this long war with Hezbollah. Do you care to weigh in on that issue?
Yeah. So, I know Yoav very well. We are friends. I served under his command 3 times and worked with him closely when he was the military secretary of the prime minister, and I was at the camp of the chief of general staff. But I think that the decision not to attack Lebanon in the first 4 days was the right decision. We didn't have the munitions. The forces in the north were not equipped at all and not ready for that. Because we shrink the ground forces, we really were able only to focus on one place, and it was obvious that we need to launch a full-scale attack on Gaza. The time we were supposedly on the defense in the north gave us time to equip, gave us time to destroy systematically Radwan forces and prepare the terms for destroying Hezbollah. And at the right moment, after 10, 11 months that we fought in Gaza, we launched the attack on Hezbollah. It couldn't have been different. If we would have attacked at the beginning, we would have lost on both fronts. We wouldn't have the ability to really concentrate the force and do the job. I remember in the first weeks, and we all remember how many things the ground forces needed, and we concentrated everything in the south. I remember visiting the north, and the divisions, they lacked serious equipment. They didn't have equipment. They didn't have enough munitions. It wouldn't have made sense attacking on both fronts. And we couldn't have not attacked in Gaza when we had 250 hostages and Hamas was shooting at us the way they were shooting. So I think the government took the right decision. And looking in perspective, I think it worked well.
Absolutely. Brigadier General Amir Avivi, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Thank you for your leadership throughout this war. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.